Welcome to the Fort Collins Fellows podcast. From Colorado State University to New Belgium Brewery and the hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails, Fort Collins has earned its well-deserved reputation as one of the top places to live in the United States. Your hosts, Patrick and Chris, were born and raised in Fort Collins. Patrick owns and runs Soukup Real Estate Services, a top-rated real estate brokerage company here in Fort Collins. Chris is the co-owner of the Murphy Whitlock Group, a top-rated residential mortgage broker based out of Fort Collins. Now join the fellas as they uncover the stories, places, and people that make Fort Collins so exceptional.
Well, today we have the CEO of Fort Collins, Colorado on our podcast here today. We are super excited to have the city manager, Kelly DiMartino. Kelly, welcome to Fort Collins Fellows. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Perfect. Well, Kelly, before we dive in, I just want to let everybody know you have worked for the city for 25 years. You got your BA from CSU. You have basically been molded for this role for many years, whether you like it or not. But we've had when we talked to Darren Attenberry years ago, and one of the first things I remember from that interview was the city of Fort Collins is basically a council manager form of government. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? And then researching all that, I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to Kelly and get her thoughts on that. But you are the day-to-day, you run the day-to-day operations of the city of Fort Collins. Is that a good explanation of what you do?
Yeah, that is a very fair explanation. I am basically responsible for, I think of it as two buckets. One bucket is making sure that we are fulfilling the council's policy direction. So they set the policy, and then I'm responsible for making sure that the organization is operationalizing it. And then also the second bucket is managing and overseeing those day-to-day 24/7 services that people in our community rely on.
I love it. Well, why don't we, for those of you that are listening and watching that don't know your backstory and where you came from, why don't you just start us out where you're from? I think you went to school back east, if I'm not mistaken. I was like,
actually, I'm a Nebraska girl.
Oh, Nebraska. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that wrong.
Not that far east.
No, not that far east. That's still considered the West for all those. But Kelly, let us know a little bit more about you, where you're from, and how you kind of got into this role as city manager.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, again, originally from Nebraska. I grew up a Nebraska farm girl and went to college at Hastings College, which is a small liberal arts school.
That's right.
There in Hastings, Nebraska. I had no awareness or familiarity whatsoever with the world of local government or ever thinking about a career in local government. And then right before I graduated college, the city of Grand Island, Nebraska was hiring a public information officer. I had a public relations class. I was sure that qualified me for the job, and somehow I got it. And I ended up getting exposed to the world of local government. My office in Grand Island was right between the city. They have a city administrator. So between the city administrator and the mayor. And I just got this amazing exposure into all things local government and quickly fell in love with it. And about 5 years later, I had a coworker who had come from Colorado originally, and she told me about this job with the city of Fort Collins that I should apply for because Fort Collins was her, quote, a great little town. And so I thought, well, that'd be good interview experience. Didn't really want the job, but thought it'd be good interview experience. Got out here, and during the interview process, I remember calling home and saying, well, now we have a problem because I want to be here. And I was fortunate enough to get the position. I started here in the city as their communications and public involvement coordinator. And then I think now I'm on my 14th job title in the city organization. Oh, wow. So I had a variety of positions in communications, and then spent some time, a couple of years as the acting HR director for the city, some time in communications and technology, and then assistant city manager, deputy city manager, interim city manager, and ultimately a couple of years ago was very honored to be selected as the new city manager.
And this is a role that you could, comparatively to city council and the mayor, this could be your career, correct? You could be 15, 20 years in this role if you wanted to?
In theory, yes. I will say the average tenure of a city manager, I think, is about 7 years right now. Fort Collins has been fortunate in its history to have longer tenured city managers, and that has provided a lot of continuity. And so, yes, it is a career position, not an elected position.
But it is voted on by city council and the mayor for your role, or is it explain how that works?
Yeah, in the council manager form of government, the city council has 3 employees that they directly hire. One of them is the city attorney, one of them is the municipal judge, and then the third one is my position as city manager. And so they went through a full-scale, national recruitment process, and then council collectively decides, who they're going to offer that position to, and then it's basically a contract position that they approve. So I do annual evaluations with the mayor and the city council.
And why it's probably such a short-term maybe horizon is because you have potentially a different boss every 2 years or at least every 4 years. And so you're kind of, a boss, as far as different city council members and mayors. So you're, having to kind of not accommodate, but, interview.
Please
every few years.
Yeah, it does change. Yes, in our system, potentially every 2 years, you're going to have either a new mayor or new council members based on how those elections are staggered. And so I think that's, again, I'm just entering my second year officially, but that is part of the appeal of the position as well, is you're constantly working with new people who are representing the community and the community interests and figuring out how you help the organization adapt to that.
I kind of want to go back to the council manager form of government, because I don't think a lot of people understand in our town. I mean, Patrick and I grew up here. We're both born and raised here. Don't quite understand or don't know how our city is managed. And you would just think, when I tell somebody that, this is the CEO of town, they're like, that's our mayor. Our mayor's in charge of everything, right? How common is this form of government? And do you see it in other parts of the country, other parts of the state, this kind of setup? Or is this kind of like your standard go-to form of government for towns like Fort Collins?
Yeah, I would say it's a fairly common model, actually. I mean, if you think about in Colorado, I think about some of our neighboring cities. So Loveland, Greeley, Windsor, Timnath, Wellington, they all have council manager model government. Some of where you see more what sometimes people refer to as a strong mayor form of government is someplace like Denver, in those much larger municipalities, a place like Baltimore, or some of those big cities where the mayor is elected and then the mayor actually brings in their cabinet, and their cabinet is responsible for the administration of the city. Council manager form of government is, again, fairly common across municipalities, and in part because it does provide that continuity for operations. It also ensures that some of your service levels, again, the operations, when you think about road maintenance or your, water and sewer system and some of those basic operations, aren't as much subject to changes within a political process.
Makes total sense. Okay, that was good. A good little recap for all. I needed that as well. So,
and you have over 2,000 employees that you're overseeing, but you have kind of heads of department that you probably, I'm sure, have more of a day-to-day interaction with. Help us understand kind of the depth of what you're overseeing. I mean, Parks and Recreation, we had, what do you call it, Chris?
The Ron Swanson of Fort Collins, for all you Parks and Rec fans out there.
The Ron Swanson of Fort Collins.
One of the great characters of the last 20 years.
Yes.
One of our most listened to episodes, by the way.
I mean, so
Mike Calhoun by chance?
Mike Calhoun. Yeah, I was about to say Mike is. That was a rocket episode. We got to shout out to Mike.
Yes, but head of Parks and Recreation. There's so many different departments. Is that kind of what your focus is primarily making sure those departments are running as effectively as possible?
Yeah, so we have approximately 2,600 employees in the city organization and a wide variety of services. And so the way we're structured as an organization is by what we call service areas. So utilities, for instance, is a service area. Not all municipalities have full-scale utility, but Fort Collins is one where we deliver light and power, water, wastewater, stormwater. As you may know, we also now deliver municipal broadband. So that, which is an exciting kind of future.
And you're talking about connection, right?
Connection. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's one service area. Community services is when you talk about parks and recreation, natural areas, our cultural services. That's another area. Planning, development, and transportation. So if you think about our, transport bus services in there, engineering, the people who are designing all the roads and bridges, the people who are maintaining those, the streets department, clearing our snow. We have sustainability services, which is more of a policy arm of the city and also responsible for economic health, environmental health, and social sustainability efforts. So that's part of our city organization. Again, I won't go through all 8 of them, but we have 8 major functional areas that we're structured by.
So Kelly, so now we kind of got a good overview of what you do, how the city is run and everything like that. Let's kind of dive in. You have a big meeting this afternoon. What is the state of kind of the operations with Fort Collins right now? What is on the top of your priority? I got a couple things on my notes here that I was going to mention, but I'm just curious. Here we are. We're coming into summer of 2024. Kelly, you're going on 2 years in this job. Like, what right now do the residents of Fort Collins, our listeners and viewers, what would you want to tell them that you guys are focused on right now? Is it affordable housing? Is it transportation? What is at the top of that list of things that you guys are discussing right now?
Yeah, multiple things. So I would say at that policy level, housing is the number one thing. We know it's the biggest need in the community. It is the item that gets the most attention. It is an area that's very challenging for us to meaningfully impact, but housing is definitely something that we're talking a lot about. Within the city organization, I would say on more that operations, again, the ongoing work of the 24/7 operations. A couple areas of focus for us. One is digital transformation. So we have a lot of systems, technology systems, whether that's in our operations, things like our utilities billing system that have gotten very out of date. And so we're doing a lot of technology upgrade at the city. And as we do that, we're focusing on what I call complexity to simplicity. So in an organization of 2,600 people and I think 42 different departments, it's easy for people to get siloed, which, focus on sort of their sphere of the world. And so we're really as an organization looking at how do we be more customer focused and move from this model of complexity to one that is more simple and straightforward for our customer. And so that's actually a lot of work on the back end. That's part of what we are focused on as well. And then we have some new things. In the last election, the voters supported some additional investment in their city in terms of parks and recreation asset management. That's a big deal. So being able to really operationalize that and invest those resources wisely. They also invested in some additional climate and transit initiatives. And so, again, we're focusing right now on how do we allocate those dollars and make sure that we are getting highest and best use of those resources.
When you allocate those dollars, do you need the mayor or anybody to sign off on that? Or Kelly, can you just go, we're going to allocate $20 million to this right now?
I cannot.
Okay.
So this is that partnership. I know. Wouldn't that be fun?
Well, I mean, I could see how.
I'll send you my routing and bank number.
Yeah. Again, this is one of those, ultimately the policy work of the city council is to authorize the spending plan, which is the budget. And we have, our budget the adopted budget is actually around $800 million. Some of that is internal transfer between departments, though. So if you think about dollars out the door, it's more like $650 million.
Each year? 650? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Council authorizes that spending plan. And then once the money is allocated, obviously, I and many of our department heads certainly have discretion in terms of some of the more granular spending of those dollars. It would not be practical to have council involved at that level. But for something like this, council will do a higher level allocation, and then it's up to us to operationalize those dollars.
I saw, I was looking at the sales and tax budget that was coming in, and obviously with that 0.5 cent increase, it's dramatic, year over year. I think I saw 10% increase in revenue. I mean, it was a little bit higher than the budgeted, but definitely higher than a year ago. So it's real money. I mean, it's a lot of money that 0.5 cent tax increase is producing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, again, there are a lot of needs out there. And so this is one of those things where I'm like, we are very fortunate to have this level of resourcing. And there's still choice in that, right? Because there's more need than resource available. And that's part of staff provides their best recommendation. And then again, council, who is directly engaged with the community, they have that additional perspective and help influence where those dollars ultimately go.
I've done a little bit of research, and there's obviously, like, the government, in my opinion, kind of gets it one way or another, whether it's property taxes or sales tax or income tax, but we've definitely increased our sales tax from, I think it was like 7. It wasn't long ago that it was near 7, and now it's at 8.05. I think it is what it is right now, or something like that. And, on average between cities, it's kind of between 8 to 10%. So we're starting to get kind of on that higher end. When do you think, do you think that we're kind of capped, or do you seek additional needs that are going to have to come? Because like you said, there's more need than there is resources, but there's also this cost of living for, the city of Fort Collins residents. And all right, they're getting hit with insurance increases and property tax increases and the cost of housing. And now, they go to the store and buy a couch, and all of a sudden it costs them an extra, 8% versus what the tag says.
Yeah, I do think that is something that we're very attentive to. And again, we have been, I believe, very conscious in how we spend those resources over the years, and have been able to really stretch our resources as a city organization. I think, again, we're now at that place where we're no longer for a long time, we were on the very low end of that. I think we're now in the, again, for sure above the mid, but in a still what I would consider a very healthy space in terms of our sales tax rate. Where I see the conversation happening now is more around some of those taxes that are renewable. So we have a 1/4 cent sales tax for street maintenance that we have had in place for decades now. And, every 10 years we renew it, and it's continually renewed. I think there is question to be had in the community of, without increasing the level, but at some point, do you just say this is part of our ongoing service level? It's always going to be our ongoing service level, and it's no longer sort of temporary 10-year tax that we go back time and time again, but it becomes part of an ongoing base. I think there's room for that kind of conversation in the community. Similarly, we have a community capital improvement. It's called CCIP, a 1/4 cent, that has built many of our capital projects. So right now, one that is in design is the Southeast Community Innovation Center. That was on the last round of that capital tax. If you've been on Linden Street lately and seen that project, that came through one of those 1/4 cent ballot measures. So again, I see those being renewals that will want to continue, but they're not actually increasing the rate at this point.
And I think that's something like when you came here from Grand Island and visited Fort Collins and said, we've got a problem, as a result of those capital improvement projects that, I think we've done a really good job of allocating resources to street maintenance, cleanliness, curbs, gutters, medians, alleyways. I mean, all these different projects that are
trails.
That are just super unique to Fort Collins. And there's a reason why we're getting voted for best town square in the United States type deal. And, it's just, the list goes on. One thing I've been doing over the last couple of years is really watching city council. It's fascinating, which is weird to say, but it's amazing to see the power that, a direction has. So city council says, okay, we like high level, we want this idea. City staff, Kelly DiMartino, go get it done. And you guys present this phenomenal plan of all the data supporting things, the timeline, the overarching idea. And then if it gets voted on, it's like, boom, let's go. And I mean, the implementation, it's, a lot of people have these grand ideas, but then the implementation doesn't happen. It's like, whatever is going on at City of Fort Collins seems to be working very well. And if it's given direction, you guys crush it.
Well, thank you. That is one of the things that I think we have great history in and great systems to support. I mean, our council, we're very intentional that when a new council comes into office, we have a priority setting session with them. And, it's their role to develop what are those priorities of the organization. It's our role then to go in and say, okay, here's what it's going to take to do that. And sometimes that's going to require additional budget, in which case, again, we might bring council some trade-offs of things that they might continue reallocating some resource. Sometimes it's going to be policy changes that need to happen. A big part of our role is making sure that we're engaging with the community as we're doing that. So staff does a lot of community engagement to help ensure that those council choices are well informed and that they are hearing the voice of the community in the recommendations that are coming forward to them. And then we report back on it of, again, how are we doing in progressing on that implementation? So
Kelly, one thing, real quick, Chris, because you just said this, Kelly, and I think it's important. Community engagement, the land use code. We sent out 90 some odd thousand mailers, but I think we had something like 500 pieces of feedback or something like that. Really? How can we get the city involved, or like the city citizens involved more versus, because it was a big spend, if I remember right, on the mailers, and having kind of a seemingly like meh response of,
we got 500 people responding out of a
Kelly can correct me. I might be wrong on that number. Okay. Kelly can correct me, but I remember it being relatively low. How are we getting kind of the citizens of the city like informed and engaged?
Yeah, it is a constant challenge and something that's ever evolving. So that was actually I'll say an interesting experiment for us, because we do, we're relying more and more on promoting things via social media. Certainly our city website, we do a resident survey every couple of years. And this last survey demonstrated for the first time that the primary source of information for our community about city items is the city website. It's always up to that point been word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So we're relying on their neighbors and local media. And that has now changed. So we're relying a lot more on that. We were getting some feedback from the land use code item that, again, people didn't think we had done enough engagement and outreach. And that was a sticking point for people, that they didn't believe we were kind of listening to the full community. So really, again, I'll say as a bit of an experiment, we're like, okay, well, let's invest in doing a postcard to every single residence in Fort Collins. And it was not an inexpensive piece to do. And at the end of the day, we ended up with a few hundred people who still came to the open house. So, people can hypothesize a lot about what that means. I think at some level, unless people really understand the impact to them specifically, it's hard to get people engaged in these kind of high level policy initiatives. Yeah. There's also an ongoing challenge for us we do a lot of outreach and engagement around, like our city strategic plans and policy goals. So if you think about our climate action plans, the community has strongly supported those very ambitious climate action goals. When it comes time, though, to then operationalize those into now here's what it means to achieve those, people have varying levels of support. And so I think it's just this constant effort for us of how and when do we engage. We've also worked really hard in the last couple of years to reach those voices who maybe traditionally have not been as heard in the city organization. And whenever you do that, I think when we're more intentional about reaching those individuals and hearing those voices, some people who have known what I'll call as the old system of how to make their voice heard are feeling a bit of a loss of power. And so, that's... So is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It depends on your perspective.
It is hard. People have so much things going on in their life, and then have them to kind of put everything aside. But no, before I cut Patrick off, I didn't mean to do that. I was just going to talk about a couple things that I actually did receive in the mail. I live in Midtown Fort Collins, and they both got my attention. One, obviously, the last couple of years, Flint, Michigan, and all the water stuff that's going on. It sounds like they're testing the tap water in all the homes in Fort Collins, or you know what? We got a letter that says we're going to go and make sure. What is it?
Was that the schools?
No, our house. Like actually at our residence. Do you know anything about this, Kelly?
I do not know about this.
Okay.
Sounds like I should. Is this for the?
I mean, they basically said, between I think it's March and May, they're going to be going and just making sure that the water going into our house is like legit and there's no contamination and there's no issues. And I could send you the letter they sent me, by the way, if you want. I'd be happy to. And it was like, but you have 3 options. You can do it yourself, or we're just going to naturally come to it and test it ourselves. So anyways, I was curious if you knew about that.
I don't know if that's just part of the standard every I've
never seen it before, but I liked it.
Water quality testing that is required.
And it's the main water line into the house. And they go, we will drill a little hole, test it. Dude, I swear to God, I got this in the mail. And then we will refill
sure you're not going to have somebody come and just rip you off in your house and just come in and steal everything?
Haven't provided any other information to these people.
You send me the letter and I'll follow up.
Okay, my next question is the single service for trash.
Yes.
So we've been with UWM since we moved we're like Prospecting College, just so you know. And we got a letter that says now everything is going to Republic. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
And when I was researching this, I was like, okay. And I was like, so if we wanted to stick with a current provider, there was going to be a fee. I was like, well, I don't want to have that. So I'm probably going to end up making the change. But part of it was around traffic in neighborhoods and trucks in neighborhoods. And I was kind of like, I've never driven around town thinking, God, look at all these trash trucks driving around. But what was the reason behind this? And a little bit more information about that.
Yeah. So this is one of those, again, a great example of how our process works that the last city council, when they came into office 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, one of their priorities was to explore trash contracting.
Okay.
And this is something that in the community we have looked at a few different times over the decades, I'll say. And really it is for a couple of reasons. One, environmental reasons, because of the number, when you have multiple trash companies, they're never going on the same days, right? Mm-hmm. So you end up with additional climate impact and air pollution. The other thing is the wear and tear on the streets. Those trash trucks are very heavy and they do have a bit of a disproportionate impact in terms of the wear and tear on streets. Wow. And it's often a trash truck and then a recycling truck.
Yep.
Not, at the same time. And so you could have some neighborhoods where there might be 6 or 8 trucks in a week. So that was part of the motivator behind the conversation. And ultimately, as council went through that policy discussion, they determined that that was a change they wanted to make. And so we went through a full request for proposal process. And ultimately, Republic was the company that won that request for proposals.
Did you have a bunch of companies pitching their proposals, or did that?
We did have multiple companies who bid on that. I think 3, but I'd have to go back and look for sure. Might have been 4.
Republic buyout, was it Gallegos or?
They did.
Yeah. Okay. So it's that one right there. Okay. I was curious about that because I think you have to make your decision by this fall. I want to say this is coming.
Actually, sooner than that. So yes. So we will. The service will begin in September, and so I think it's by the end of April 30th, maybe, that people need to select which type of service they want.
Which size bin and what kind of service they want. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that it will be a benefit to contracting, which we do not currently have, is yard waste. And so when you none of the haulers currently include that as part of their base service. And now that will be included as part of the base service for people. And so when you think about our overall community diversion goals and our road to zero waste, it's an important part of that metric as well.
So quick follow-up on that. Proud to say I have a zero-scaped yard. I have no lawn. We don't have any watering going on.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's true. We love it. Now, my wife and I briefly looked into, are there tax breaks for not having a yard or zero-scaping, or, because water is obviously a big, topic of conversation when you talk about anything housing related or anything really in terms of development in Northern Colorado. Is that something that the city would throw out there? Like if you did a zero-scaped yard or something like that, you could get a tax break? Or is there something already? I feel like there's something in place out there. We weren't able to get it because it wasn't like we were putting it in. It was already in existence.
Yeah, I don't know that there are tax breaks per se, but we do have programs to incentivize xeriscaping in terms of rebate programs and programs to help with the design of xeriscaping. And then obviously one of the big incentives for people is, you have a much lower water bill, presumably.
But yes, it's great.
Than your neighbors. So that's part of the incentive as well.
Although when you have a child, a baby, it adds to the laundry and other things. But anyways, that's here nor there. No, okay, Kelly, I'm going to send you that thing on the water. It's they sent me two. Maybe it's a scam. Maybe I'm being scammed. I don't even realize it. But real quick before we go on,
probably not. It's probably one of the
I was
things
for
happening in the city that I can't keep my pulse on all the little things.
All right, that's all right.
All the big things and the little things.
All right. And one other thing I wanted to bring up too was I just read this yesterday, kind of switching topics, but going back to transportation. I do want to get your thoughts on housing here a little bit later, but I read that Governor Polis is working on a passenger train from Pueblo to Fort Collins. Like I read this yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody in the state who's grown up here is like, why don't we have one of these already? He said 3 years. I'm like, no way that's going to happen. But you're shaking your head like you've heard of this. Like,
yes.
What is going on with that?
So it is something that we know is in the works, and we are right now talking about where might we get some funding to do a study in terms of station location and design in Fort Collins.
Because in my head, I'm like, where does this go down? Does it go I-25 east, west of I? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so that is the question that is at play right now, and we do have some of our team in planning, development, and transportation who are going to be engaging in those conversations and starting to, again, we need to get some funding to do design, but to identify what might be potential station locations with Fort Collins.
I mean, that'd be awesome. They were showing like bar carts and food carts and everything, Patrick. Like it was this whole thing that Governor Polis was doing some, I don't know if it was a ribbon cutting or something. It was like literally yesterday, the day before.
Yeah, so. I was just talking about it. We went down to Colorado Springs on Saturday. I just hate driving on I-25. And
yeah.
There was something like this there, I would probably go down to Colorado Springs and Denver more often. And I'm sure people from Denver and Colorado Springs would come up here and, explore different areas. So that's definitely pretty cool. And I'm sure that's kind of something that you have the ability to see all the inner workings of Fort Collins and what gets you excited each day, waking up, going to work for Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins in the future? Like, I think this is going to be really cool. I think XYZ is going to be really cool in the future for Fort Collins. If that wasn't a clear enough question, I was asking, sorry. I was asking, what about Fort Collins' future is exciting to you?
Yes, no, that's great. So many things. I mean, in part, what's exciting to me is, again, just thinking about this big picture right now. Fort Collins is, 170,000. We're going to be 255,000 people here, by 2050 is what's projected. And so, again, when I think about the future of our city and how do we maintain and have more spaces of connection for people? So I think about more like localized neighborhoods. We're talking a lot right now about this concept of 15-minute cities so that people can, get on a bike or walk and be somewhere where they can be at restaurants and little shops and have that sort of vibrancy, the park. So that, knowing that we have the foundation for that in Fort Collins is really exciting to me. In the short term, the fact that we're going to be building a new Southeast Community Innovation Center and being able to do that in partnership with the school district and the library, like that potential that we have in our community to continue to leverage these partnerships, that's really exciting to me. Some of these, honestly, like I thrive on some of the what I'll call stickier issues and thinking about how do we break through some of these things that have been really hard to solve. So when you were talking about transportation, Fort Collins is co-owner in the Northern Colorado Airport. And
that was a question. I saw that you were part of a letter that was sent that last year, what they want to do and kind of some thoughts on that.
Yeah. And so how, right now, I'm going to say that's an underutilized resource in the region for sure.
Big time.
And you think about the future of Northern Colorado and that becoming a different level of transportation hub, whether that is rail service coming in and out of there or commercial air, or even I'm now a big fan of landline. So, those kind of projects that we think about the future are definitely exciting to me. And then the other thing I'll just say, one of the things that motivates me is it really is these core services of the 24/7 services that a lot of people don't even think about. But I look at things like our police department and how our Fort Collins Police Services is leading in the industry, I would say, in terms of how we're serving the community and being able to help continue to foster that and connect with others in the region and the country and sort of model new ways of doing things is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we got to get the chief of police on here one of these days. That's we might need your help on that one, Kelly. That'd be
Chief Swoboda.
I can make it happen.
But when I was looking at the report, the budget and everything, like Patrick was talking about how much revenue we're bringing in with those just small little raises there. But you talk about fire and police and everything like that. And I encourage everybody to go to the Fort Collins website and look at that budget. You break down, how many, the traffic citations at each intersection based on the cameras. It's kind of fascinating to look and see all the numbers and everything, how you guys are tracking that stuff.
We do. And the great thing about our budget is you can see this 17-page budget in brief, or if you really are interested, you can go into the 700-page version. And
full nerd out there. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to do that, Kelly.
Well, Kelly, we're kind of coming to the end of the show. Chris, I know you want to talk housing real quick. Is there anything specific you wanted to chat about?
No, I guess, Kelly, we talk about housing all the time on this podcast. And we just talked to Christopher and Peter and Kate from YIMBY, Yes in My Backyard. I scratch my head and be like, how we have such an amazing place. Like Patrick says, we're always at the top 100. I mean, I always feel like I'm playing devil's advocate on this housing issue. It's like, I don't see values coming down. We only have a limited number of space. I know they're talking about going up. You got the U+2. I guess just real quickly, Kelly, what are your thoughts on affordable housing? And I'm all for it. I went to Bird Whistle, which is this new affordable housing unit. They just had an amazing grand opening with a bunch of agents, real estate agents and everything like that. And I think that's wonderful. But I look at it as like, man, that's just a hard problem to solve in our community with what I think is coming. And you just have more people. Like I got a call this afternoon with a family from Texas that's moving here, and they have money and they love Fort Collins and they love it here. So before I keep rambling on, Kelly, quick thoughts on housing before we wrap up.
Yeah, it's a really complex challenge for us. And I think in the space of what I will say, capital A, affordable housing, we continue to work with our partners, Fort Collins Housing Authority and others, again, to try, it's almost like 15 to 60 units at a time, right? Mm-hmm. Small but steady progress. That is an area where, again, we did have a property tax measure on the ballot that did not pass. And so, again, the funding for that is not nearly where it needs to be. So we just know that's going to be a challenge, and we're working with partners to leverage where we can. I think the other piece, though, is for people, it's about housing choice. It's not about capital A affordable housing. It's about housing that is affordable to them. Regardless,
the definition of affordable housing is very different depending on who you ask.
Yeah, just regardless of their income bracket. Yeah. And I think you all are very familiar with. We took a couple different runs at the land use code, trying to update that. Some of those more impactful changes in terms of the space of housing were not ultimately supported by at least a large enough portion of the community that they wanted to send that to the ballot. Council will be considering what I'm calling the 80% or those foundational updates. And so I think, for me, it's slow progress, but one of the lessons we learned was we're going to have to do this again in smaller chunks and more issue by issue versus trying to kind of do it in a broad broad approach.
Yeah.
We also know it's a huge, I just came from a conference a couple weeks ago and was talking to someone, from Golden they're like, yeah, now our median home price is $800,000. And so this is a statewide issue. And we're also watching to see some of the things that are going to come down from the state, if any, and how that might impact what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It is a complicated issue.
Brick by brick, don't ignore it. That's what I love about a lot of what City of Fort Collins does. They don't turn away from a hard challenge, but they're, take little chops at it, and eventually, we'll make a big enough dent, or, a significant dent, but it's better. It might not be fix everything by any means, but it's better than nothing. Absolutely. So that's, definitely a cool task that you guys are taking on.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I think we're also, especially in that affordability space, I'm like, this isn't housing specific, but when you think about the programs where the city can influence things like utilities and, again, connection, our rebate programs there, our lower income programs, we now have a app that if anybody's rolled in the low income utility program, they're also automatically going to be eligible for those in recreation and in other places. So we're really trying to, where we can, influence people's livability. Mm-hmm. Even if we can't influence housing prices, we can do other things. And that's where we're focusing some of our efforts.
That's a good point. Yeah. I could say the connection's amazing. We have Fort Collins Utilities and Connection. It's all great.
That's awesome.
Kelly, thank you so much. So we're going to wrap up.
All right.
By the way, Patrick, did you see that top 4 beer cities in the United States?
That's right.
We were 4. We came in number 4. Grand Rapids, Michigan, number 1. Who knew? So fake we are big news, but fake news. So we are one of the top microbrew places in the country, probably in the world. Might as well just throw it in there. So we always ask all of our guests Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, do you have a go-to patio brewery that you like to visit for a cold beer on a Friday or Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, this seems like such an unfair question, knowing that
we've had some different answers lately. It's not always what you think, but
no, I know. And I love listening to people and hearing what they say. So I have 2 that came to mind for me.
Perfect.
So one is Odell. It's like traditional.
It is the best outdoor patio, the fire pits, the food trucks. If you haven't been, you got to go. Yeah.
My son, who lives in Milwaukee now, he and his wife love Odell. So whenever they come to visit, we take a deck of cards. And
I love it.
So Odell has sentimental value for me. I recently moved to a new part of town. And so Maxline is now close to neighborhood brewery for me. And I'm loving Maxline.
Maxline's great. It's right down the street from my office. They got good food trucks, and their patio outside in the summertime is great.
Yep.
That's one of the first ones for Max. Maybe one other time for Maxline, but I think only one or
not a lot of Maxline.
So. And that's great.
The patio, again, it's essentially in a parking lot, as you know, which is fantastic. It's like there's not a lot of traffic by it. It's really this wonderful hidden little gem, and I love it.
Perfect. Well, hey, thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on, the CEO of Fort Collins.
I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you both, and thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you for what you do.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Friends of the podcast, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. We thank you so much for your support. And just so you know, my amazing co-host, Patrick Soukup, over there, he is the founder, started Soukup Real Estate. If you ever need any questions about buying or selling, or just want a market report on your existing home, reach out to Patrick. His team is absolutely fantastic. Born and raised in Fort Collins. His information is right there on the page. Strongly recommend reaching out.
And same for you, Chris. As if you guys are looking at buying or refinancing a home here in Northern Colorado, there's nobody better to reach out to than the Murphy Whitlock Group. And Chris Murphy is going to take incredible care of you. So do not hesitate to reach out, ask questions. He is in no rush, no hurry. So give him a chance. And I think he's going to do a great job for you. Thank you for watching.